everybody, this is Kohdok here, and yay, I finally get to talk about WiXoss, as it has finally gotten an English release. I know it's spelled W-I-X-O-S-S, but it is pronounced WiXoss, because this ain't no weak sauce, no. Anyway, WiXoss is a game that has actually been out since 2014. I actually have a video where I go over one of the decks that came out in the Japanese version, specifically this one. It's a nice video, one of the ones where I talk about how to put together a sort of starter product like it. It's definitely a good look, but WiXoss has been out since 2014, and I actually wondered why it took them so long to release the game in English, because the anime that came with the original WiXoss, called Selector Infected WiXoss, which is sort of a Madoka homage / critique of the grimdark series Madoka Magica, it got a decent amount of buzz outside of Japan, which would make me think that that would have been the time to try to release the game internationally, is when all that buzz is happening, but that apparently didn't really happen. Although, I guess if there was a second best time to release the game, although, you know, there's that old meme, it's like, the first time to fix the problem was the moment the problem happened, the second best time to fix the problem is now. So I suppose it's a good time because they recently had a format change. The Lurig deck has gotten an overhaul. The Lurig deck I will go over once I actually start opening the boxes and showing off what's inside. But there's been a couple of large overhauls to the Lurig deck and to kind of the format. We have entered what is called the Diva Format, hence why, even though the WiXoss deck I showed off before had only one main character in it, these boxes clearly have 3 on the front. So I will go into Diva Format as well as going into the game itself in a bit. Now, WiXoss itself, it's a game that's kind of it's sort of an interesting blend of concepts from other card games such as Duel Masters and Buddy Fight and Game Mino-like. It borrows a lot of them, kind of innovates on them, offers some new and interesting ideas for all of them. Now, today, the game has been out in America for several months now. Apparently, it's gotten up to 2 sets. However, the physical location I finally found that would sell me some only had these 2 decks. I would have gotten more if I had the opportunity. I'm trying to find these games in like local stores, but I don't know why, but a lot of the stores around me seem reluctant to pick up a lot of new games. Like the most recent game any of them has picked up is Digimon. But yeah, WiXoss has been available since the tail end of 2021. But what we have here are the 2 starter decks for the Niji Sanji deck, which is a white-black deck, and the Ancient Surprise deck, which is the red-blue-green deck. So between these 2 decks, we have cards from all of the colors. Now, these are very small boxes. They are similar to the one put out before. This was the 5th anniversary Pyrrhic deck, which came in a very small, just regular-sized normal box. And what's special about the Pyrrhic deck is that it's a 5th anniversary deck and was actually sold for $5. So there are some problems that this deck shares with these here, although translation issues is not one of them. However, I feel like it kind of gets away with some of the things that it does because it's like a discount product. However, these, despite coming in small boxes and generally having the same contents as the 5th anniversary $5 deck, they're charging $15 for these, which I don't know if that's a very smart move, since we have entered an age where a lot of the card games, especially new ones, especially ones that are making their way overseas, are trying as much as possible to lower their barrier to entry. Like we have the Digimon cards, which are $5 in Japan. They're $10 here, but they come with a booster pack. We have Game Mino-like, which used to be like a $20 per deck game. Now it's like on average like $7. Having a deck at 15 is a bit of a miss in my understanding, especially considering it's basically the same contents as one of their $5 decks. I'd have tried for something a bit lower, although it's not as bad as Alternate Souls, which is like this game that the Force of Will people actually had to try to crowdfund twice because of the first time it failed, and each starter there is like $33, and I haven't seen any attention for that anyway. But anyway, let us take a look at some of these cards, although before we really get into much of anything, I do, of course, have to vent about the playmat. As you can see, it's kind of folded up in this really horrible way in order to fit into the tiny box, but the real problems are when we unfold it. Okay, so here is our mat. I've attempted to flatten it as much as I can. Now, most games actually used to ship in these tiny little boxes like this, but one of the big reasons they shifted over to the larger boxes you tend to see today is because they would pack in these playmats and you don't want to fold them too much, because this is on like a really thin kind of paper. The crease marks are terrible, but that's not really the start of it. The worst sin that this mat does is the problem with game design that I have probably harped on the longest on this channel, in that the deck includes one single player playmat with the rules printed on the back. Now, it's pretty obvious why they would make this design decision. You know, it's cheaper to just put everything onto a single piece of paper. However, the problem with this is self-explanatory. What if, for example, I'm in the middle of playing a game and I need to check something in the rule book? How do I do that when what is ostensibly the rules book is currently covered with all of the cards I have, everything I have in play, all the things I don't want to move? I mean, I'm just now learning the game, so I don't really want to move it out of the way. How do I check the rules? Pretty obvious as to why this is a problem. It's why I keep talking about this. There are so many ways to fix these problems. I mean, you could do the rules on a separate sheet. That is certainly an alternative, but you can also include a two-player playmat with the rules on the back, because think about it, you need two decks in order to play, right? So if it was a two-player playmat, one player would set out their two-player playmat and the other player would use their playmat for rules. So a two-player playmat does not have the problem the way the one-player playmat does. And not to mention, the one-player playmat, it's kind of a mess here. It's a bit, I mean, I guess they're going for like a kind of, you know, sort of artistic design with like the sleek and slim look. But the thing is, it's a little hard to read. You wanna see how the Japanese mat looks? Because it's pretty ridiculous. There. Yeah, kind of amazing, isn't it? When the Japanese version of the mat is more comprehensible to English speakers than the English version of your mat, because everything is nice and easy. I mean, it's very, very basic kind of design, but everything is crisp and clear. There is no doubt in your mind how everything works. You get clearly that the Signy zones, the main deck, the check zone, the lyric zone, I mean, the instructions themselves are in Japanese, but it's just so much more clear and crisp. And this is, granted, coming from a game that has had that's been around for 8 years, has about 8 years of feature creep. But honestly, if you ask me, I think that if you're trying to launch a game into a new environment, or just launching a game period, I would have switched back over to this more crisp and clear design. You want people to know what they're doing. It's like I said with the I made like a year ago, I talked about rule books, and I talked about I used Beavis and Butthead as an example. It's like, oh, you want these people to, as soon as they open a game, as soon as they start futzing around with the stuff, you want to assemble your rules and your things in a way where players can easily get off the ground and start rolling, and that's another thing here. Although the Japanese mat commits the same sin. It does have the rules on the back despite being a single player playmat, but the original version of WiXoss solved this problem by just giving you two. You got two of these mats in each set, so you still only had to have one type of paper to run off, but because there were two, that means between two players you now had four mats. So two mats that could be used for one each for each player to have their own playmat, a third one to consult for rules, and a fourth one in case one of them gets damaged. That kind of aggravates me, in that WiXoss had solved this playmat problem and then promptly unsolved it again. Like I said, the $5 edition, the $5 5th anniversary deck, it also contains one of these sorts of like really crummy kind of basic mats where it only has one with the rules on the back, but I'm willing to give this one a pass because it's a discount deck. It's a $5 pack. It's a discount product meant to be picked up for cheap. So the fact that it has that discount, I don't mind if the contents are a bit lackluster, when the whole point is that it's meant to be a less expensive product. So the $5 one gets a pass. The $15 one, which is like 300% more expensive for essentially the same contents, doesn't really get that same kind of leeway. So there are, I would love to stick to using this mat. I think I will stick to using this mat, but I do have to point out the differences between the two. And it has to do with the lyric zone. So the original game had, you only had one lyric zone, which represented your character, your avatar, what have you. However, in the Diva block, you now have 3 Lurig zones because you have your center Lurig, who acts basically the same as the Lurig in the original game, but you also have the support Lurigs, the assist Lurigs, which actually have their own rules to it. And what these assist Lurigs have done is they have replaced a couple of old game mechanics, those being arts cards and character limited cards. Okay, I confess I might have gotten a little ahead of myself just then, because I started talking about, replacements and stuff without even getting into the rules. So what exactly are the rules of WiXoss? So to explain the rules, I am actually going to use the new Niji Sanji deck. Now, Niji Sanji, believe it or not, is not an original creation of the WiXoss lore the way the Ancient Surprise group is. Niji Sanji is actually a group of VTubers, so that might be one of the reasons that they went with this deck in English, is because they were maybe hoping that people were aware of VTubers, although I personally don't know much about Niji Sanji myself. As most of you know, I am a Hololive fan personally. However, Hololive was picked up by Bushiroad, and Bushiroad makes game me no like. That, and I don't know if they're ever going to bring the Hololive stuff over in English, so I might not get many opportunities to talk about Hololive related card games. Anyway, what is a VTuber? I'm sure some of you might think. Well, you guys are probably familiar with live streamers, where people basically, it's like a fireside chat only done live. Basically, they turn on a camera and they interact with people on the internet, whether it be through, by playing video games or just having conversations or whatever. VTubers are basically people who do that only with an animated avatar that uses like the face recognition technology. You might be familiar with that from for Mario or something like that, or some of you might have something on your phone, like your emojis can react to your facial movements. It's basically that. I probably shouldn't go on about it too long. I should probably teach you about the game. But yeah, all of the Niji Sanji cards in here are based on the various talents from that group. So starting off, we have our Lurig. This is what is going to comprise the vast majority of your Lurig deck. There are 2 real types of cards in the game. I understand there's like a third one that's sideways, but you have the white-back cards go into your Lurig deck, including the sideways one, which is called a piece, and you have your black-backed main deck, which is the one where you draw 5 cards from at the start of the game. The Lurig deck is actually kind of this ingenious little piece of design in that it's essentially a second hand that you have access to throughout the entire game. So there are cards that might make you discard cards from your hand. Those, however, do not take cards away from your Lurig deck. It is a bag of tricks that you always have access to, and it's something that's been in the game from the very beginning. Although in the original game, they had cards called arts. Like one of my favorite cards in the original game is this card called Grave Knight. It's a card that lets you set up your discard pile, which is good for black color decks because they use the discard pile a lot. And that is how a lot of these newer cards work. These newer cards have they've been replaced by the assist Lurigs, which surprisingly serve a lot of the same roles as the arts cards. I'll get into that a bit later, but each Lurig basically has a level and a limit. You notice right here, Liza's limit is, her level is 0 and her limit is 0, and that's not going to do anybody any good. Now, at the start of your turn, what you do is you actually want to grow your character. Now, each character has what is called a grow cost, although for some reason it translated as glow in the English version. This is, I presume, a translation issue because Japanese does not have a sound in their language that is analogous to the letter L, so they use the letter R instead, and that's actually a pretty common translation error. But in this case, the cost is 0. Later ones actually have a cost, and we'll get into those later. So now she has a level of 1 and a limit of 2. Now, this is a combination of the level mechanic from Game Me No Like and the size mechanic found in Buddy Fight. Now, in Buddy Fight, you have a limit of 3. You can only have 3 points of size in your realm at a time. However, in the case of WiXoss, how much size you can handle actually increases with your character level. So, level 1 means that I can play level 1 Signy, which are this game's equivalent of, monsters, minions. They have stats and they do battle. They go into one of these Signy zones here, and limit is how much combined level total they can have in play at a time. So they can have level 1, they can play level 1 Lurigs, but they can only have 2 levels worth of Lurigs in their Signy zones up here at a time. Now, of course, this leaves one of these Signy lanes open because I can only put so many Signy in play thanks to my limit. Now, the Signy zones, you have 3 of them, and your opponent also has 3, and they line up directly to each other, and they are essentially like lanes. Like, I've used the League of Legends reference before, where your goal is to try to push your damage through the lanes. So if your opponent can put Signy in front of yours, and if you fight, it is a fight where highest power wins. So this one at just 3,000 might lose. If a Signy is destroyed, it actually does not go to your discard pile. It actually goes to your energy zone, which I will talk about in a bit. But basically, your goal is to crush all 7 of your opponent's life cloth. Now, the life cloth are your life total for the game, and they work pretty much the same as the Duel Master's shields, as each time an opponent successfully hits you through an empty Signy zone, or actually attacks you with your Lurig actually gets 1 attack per turn. They sort of like fly over the battlefield and deal an attack that hits your opponent that cannot be blocked by any of your Signy, only by a special card with a shield on it. You have a little guard shield on this little card here, and that is what that can block a Lurig attack. It's actually the only way to block a Lurig attack, and these things only block Lurig attacks. I think some people might get confused by this. The cards with G can only stop Lurig attacks. You can only stop a Signy with another Signy. Anyway, what happens is you have your 7 life points, and when an opponent successfully attacks you through an empty Signy zone, like this one here where we didn't have one before, they crush one of these life cloth. And what these life cloth have is they actually don't go to your hand, but they do still have the trigger effect. So what happens is when a life cloth is destroyed, if it has this little bar down here where it has like the little star shape here, it has a little action that you can perform when it is destroyed as a result of combat as your life cloth, and you can activate that effect. In this case, I would take 2 virtual Signy from my discard pile to my hand, but there currently aren't any there right now. But you can only have 20 of these cards in your deck with the Life Crush effect, so you have to pick them fairly carefully. You cannot build an entire deck out of these cards. And what happens is, after you check the effect, the card actually goes to your energy zone. Now, there are several ways to actually add cards to your energy zone. You also charge one. You can also charge one after your draw step, so it's not like damage is the only way to get this. You can also build it up over time from the top of your deck, but it adds to the comeback mechanic in that whenever your Signy are destroyed, or if you take any damage, it adds to the energy you get to spend on subsequent turns. So it's a really good comeback mechanic. It's better than the one that you see in Game Mino. Like, what happens is they have the damage and charged energy in that game are 2 different things. In this game, it's the same thing. If you take damage, you get energy to spend. If you take it from the top of your deck, you get energy to spend. So it's not the only method to do it, but it is a good way to get like a good big ramp of energy. So you have to be careful in how much damage you do, as you might hand your opponent the ability to do things with their cards. For example, you might give them the ability to grow to the next level, in which case the grow cost of Liza level 2 is actually 1 white mana, which I can pay for using either of these here. So I would send this to the discard pile in order to level up. Now we are level 2 with a limit of 5, which means I can now I can finally get something into every zone, but one of them must remain at level 1 in order to do this. And this goes all the way up to 3. It used to actually be able to go as high as 5. 4 was typically the standard. Some characters could go up as high as 5, but in this case, the limit is pretty much 3. Although here is where we get to some of the interesting flexibility that the game allows. In the previous game, I talked about how there are 2 things that the new Diva setting has changed that are different from how the game used to be played. In the original game, you had arts cards and character limited cards. So the perfect example for both of these is going to be this Death Beam card. This Death Beam card, it's an arts card, meaning that you pay it, you pay the cost and then you perform its effect. It's honestly one of the best parts of the Lurig deck, is the fact that it essentially it's part of your hand that your opponent can't really interfere with. It's something you always have access to. That's the thing I really love about the Lurig deck. It's a really fascinating design, but it also has a bar that says Iona Limited. So Iona is the character on the deck. You can see it's Iona performing the Death Beam attack in the card. So these cards could only be played by Iona. And you are seeing like Niji Sanji markings on the cards here. However, that's not a limitation. Both the arts cards and the limits have been replaced by the assist lyrics. Now what happens is your team actually has 3 lyrics, and they can be of any other color. So you can have cards that match the color of any of your 3 starting lyrics. So since we have 2 white lyrics and a black lyric, that means I can use white and black cards in my deck. You got white card, black card, and white and black mixed card. But yes, so the support lyrics, they can't attack the way the center one can. The center one can do your attack each turn. The center one is able to get to the higher level and has some effects, but what these on the side do is they sort of take the place of arts cards. Like if I want to go up to Angie level 1, what happens is she gets an effect. When I put her into play, I can return target level 2 or less Signy on your opponent's field to its owner's hand. So it has an effect that's similar to an arts card without actually being an arts card. And in fact, if I go all the way up to level 2 with her, not only do I get another effect that behaves kind of like an arts card, I actually get +1 added to my limit. You notice at level 3, she has a limit of 6. However, if I get all of my assist lyrics, if I get both of them up to level 2, which costs generic mana, I assume it's generic for any of the assist types, then I can get a +1 from each of them and actually go up to 8, which means I can put down 2 level 3s and a level 2 on my field. And yes, you are allowed to, if you want to put something stronger in a zone that already has something, you can swap them out before the battle phase. So that's the primary effect of the support characters, is that they enable you to have basically art cards and the limitations without having to actually print those limitations on the card. That was something that I thought was a bit of a problem. It means you can't make rainbow decks, like 5-color decks, like the Iona deck, even though she starts as a dark character, is actually a black and white deck. Like I said, this is probably the second best time to introduce the game, is when it undergoes such a heavy change as the support lyric. I haven't actually watched any of the Diva edition, although the Niji Sanji characters probably don't appear in it because they have their own thing they're doing, but I don't know. I've heard it isn't as good as the original one. The original one had, just that magnifique neck to it. But finally, we have sort of the super arts cards, in which case they are called pieces. Now, what a piece does is it has a very high cost. For example, this one costs 5, so this is when you play, like, if you've been saving up for a while or after you take, like, a really bad turn. And this, I'm guessing, is meant to be like a finishing condition card, because it has a ton of effects that go off at once, although they do require me to have an entire team of the Niji Sanji Sanbaka characters in order to play it. But it's that same kind of effect. You're only allowed to have 1 copy of any lyric cards in your deck, so I can't go and buy a second deck to get another copy of this. In fact, I think the entire deck is full playset, which is commendable, but like I said, the only other problem with that is it's difficult to see where you can improve those things. Although I suppose it's easier now that there's no such thing as character limited cards. But yeah, that is a look at WiXoss. Something I actually didn't really talk about, something that I think is really nice. I talked about it a little bit when I mentioned how black likes to have a lot of cards in the discard pile, so they have a lot of discard pile control. It's that each color actually has its own part of the field that it likes to control. Thanks to the fact that I now have a character in each color, thanks to how the 2 decks give me that nice variety, I can demonstrate which color has an effect on which zone. It's actually something I really like about this game's design, is not only does each color have its own style of play, but each of those styles can be attached directly to one of the central mechanics found on the playmat. For example, we have Tawil, who is a red, and red is in charge of the battlefield. They have a lot of things that buff power, they have a lot of direct Signy destruction cards, so they are about maintaining control of the Signy zone. Green, as you might estimate, it's all about growth, so their domain is the energy zone. They're all about adding more cards to the energy zone, getting bonuses from having cards in the energy zone. If you want to build ramp, then green is the color for you. White has deck control. The deck is the realm of white. They tend to have a lot of deck searching cards, ways to get out anything that they want. So if you want to have the substantial deck control, you go with white. Black, as you can imagine, controls the discard pile. They want to put cards into the discard pile. There are a lot of Lurigs that benefit from having a lot of cards in the discard pile, either from seeking them out or using beneficial effects, or seeking things out from the discard pile in order to put them into play. So that is why the Iona deck that I showed off before, it is a black and white deck, which means those elements combined mean that there are sort of no cards in her deck or discard pile that are out of reach. You're not going to deprive an Iona deck of the cards that they want. And then finally we have Blue, who, it's a little hard to illustrate here, but I'm just going to drop it down here. Blue controls the hand. So Blue has a lot of draw effects, it has a lot of discard effects. Discard effects are usually the realm of Black and Magic, but in WiXoss they are the realm of Blue. A lot of hand control, a lot of those sorts of tricks. Each one, they also have some additional tricks, things that allow them to do some interesting things in combat, like Blue can also freeze opponents. But in general, it's safe to say that each of the colors of WiXoss has their own place and domain on the playmat. And so there we are, WiXoss in English at long last. I'm sorry it's taken me this long to get any of the cards related to it, but I'm really trying to stick to supporting my local game stores, and it's not that easy to do when you're trying to order them online. Although now that I know that this game really is out and about, I am going to try to pick up some more, maybe highlight some more stuff. But in general, that is the gist of WiXoss. I think it's a very interesting set of mechanics, the way that it sort of refines and improves upon the mechanics from so many other games is one of the reasons I like it so much. I also like it, I actually like the original anime. I actually like the fact that the original anime does not like try to teach you the rules or like go over the game that much. The games are actually happening. You can follow them if you know how to play, and that I think makes them a bit more fascinating. But the original anime focused a lot more on the character than it did on the game, and that's one of the things that drew me to it. But yeah, like I said, I hope that we get a bit more adaptation to the market from these. I hope we get maybe a bit of a drop on the cost of these to make it easier for more people to get into the game. But yeah, that is a look at WiXoss, whose release seems to have been handled by Tomy themselves. I know I said it would probably be Hasbro who did it due to their tight partnership on things like card games, but I guess I was wrong, and Tomy is taking the plunge themselves, and I really hope it works out for them. But yeah, that is WiXoss, and until next time, this is Kohdok signing off.